Welcome to this meeting of the Commons and Rights of Way Committee. Apologies for the slight delay, but we are using technology, which sometimes has the odd gremlin. But I'll move over to Democratic Services at the start, just to take members through the process we use, and for the wider public who could be watching online. Simon.
So for apologies.
No. I just wanted you to take those online through the format of the meeting.
Oh, right. Thank you, Chair. So the meeting, you would have seen the meeting papers. They've been published on the GCC website, so you can see the agenda there. The members of the committee will be considering two applications today. The first one relates to Popes Hill, to Chestnuts Enclosure in the parish of Littledean, and the second one relates to Kidnall's Wood, Yorkley, which is in West Dean. So two Forest of Dean applications. So those will be dealt with in due course. But first of all, we'll go through the preliminaries, starting with apologies, Chair.
Yep. Looking to Joe. Any apologies, Joe?
No apologies.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting are on the 10th of December.
So I think we can take those as read, Chair.
I'm pretty sure, unless somebody's got a very good memory. Are members content that we accept the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of December?
I'm getting nods of approval and thumbs up, so...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Declarations of interest?
Not seeing any, Chair.
None.
No.
Public questions?
None.
Member questions?
None.
None in advance. Okay, before we go on to the first application, given that we've got two applications and in both cases the presentations can take a considerable time, what I would probably do, looking at the clock, would be to take a short break in between the two applications. That way, anyone watching online will be able to see the application that they have an interest in, or those that perhaps only have an interest in the second application don't need to listen through all the first, but stick with us. Okay, I'm going on to the first application. It's our pages 9 to 60, and I'll ask the officer to introduce.
Good morning. Despite what it says on your screen, my name is Andrew Holdy. Jackie will be presenting the second report. The application concerns an additional length of footpath from a Class 4 road at Popes Hill in the parish of Littledean to the area of woodland owned by the Forestry Commission called Chestnuts Enclosure. We'll start with a short slide presentation. And in front of you is slide 1A, which is a sort of general map showing the vicinity of the application, and the claimed route is within the red box in the middle of the screen. So you can see on there Chestnuts Enclosure to the west, woodland. Can we go back?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It's just moving itself. Bear with me.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so we can see the area of Chestnuts Enclosure, which is woodlands and scrub in the left part of the slide, and to the east is the hamlet of Popes Hill. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is a more detailed view of the path, and it's represented by the red line A to B to C. As we'll see from the slides, the length A to B is an enclosed track, and it was owned by the Forestry Commission, or the land over which it runs was owned by the Forestry Commission until 1971, after which time it was sold off. B to C runs across Bracken and forms part of Chestnuts Enclosure, and that's still owned by the Forestry Commission. Both parts of the path are within the statutory forest, which I'll talk about a bit later. The whole length of the claim route, A to B to C, is classified as access land under Schedule 16 of the 2000 Countryside and Rights of Way Act. Now, could we have the next slide, please? Now, this is actually taken from the road and it's looking generally towards the path and Rock House. And this was taken in 2019. I should say there are two sets of slides here. One set was taken in 2014 and the other in 2019. And in that time, when intervening time, the part of the route A to B leading up to Rock House has been surfaced with a sealed surface, essentially tarmacked. Could I have the next slide, please? This is the start of the claim route at point A, looking west. And this was taken in 2014. Next, please. This is taken from the same point. And we can see here, this is 2019, it's very dark there, but the route has now been tarmacked. Next slide, please. And this is going between points A and B, and we have the former entrance to Rock House on the left there by the shed. And this was taken in 2014, and you can see Chestnut's enclosure on the horizon. Next slide, please. Now, this is almost from the same point, showing the change in surfacing, that we have a fence erected instead of a hedge on the left-hand side, the south side, and we're sort of between points A and B. You can see the tarmac, and then there's a bit of surfacing, loose surfacing after that. May I have the next slide, please? This is the claim route looking west from Rock House, and again we can see the barn there, towards point B, and this was taken in 2014. Next slide, please. And this is 5 years on, 2019, a more recent view, and again this is looking west from Rock House towards point B. It's roughly the same position as the previous slide. Next slide, please. Now this is looking back the other way, east towards point A. This is taken in 2019. And again, we can see it's an enclosed track between A and B, of which part has been tarmacked and then surfaced where it leads to the house. May I have the next slide, please? And this is heading west again towards point B. This was taken in 2019. And again, at this point, it's an enclosed track. Next slide, please. And again, this is looking west towards point B, but this is in 2014. May I have the next slide? Now we've now reached point B, which is the end of the enclosed track. And notice a former gate post on the left, which separated Chestnut's enclosure, which is ahead of us, and the land beyond this point is owned by the Forestry Commission, from the track itself. May I have the next slide, please? And this is again taken in 2019, and what it does show is evidence of a clear route on the ground from point B looking west towards point C. This area of bracken is owned by the Forestry Commission, forms part of the statutory forest, and this then leads to the woodland itself, which is at point C. May I have the next slide? Now we're looking back again towards the start of the claim route, and this is from just past point B, looking east towards point A. So again, we can see a bit of the bracken in the foreground, and we can see the enclosed track beyond that leading eastwards. May I have the next slide? And this is from point B, looking east back to point A. Obviously, this was taken in the summer back in 2014. May I have the next slide? And again, we're in the midst of the bracken here, west of point B, looking east towards point A. And I think we can see the character of the route between B and C here. May I have the next slide? Just a close-up really to show the used line of the path between points B and C that was taken last year. May I have the next slide, please? A little bit more overgrown, but essentially this is showing the same thing. It's the used line of the path through the bracken west towards the woodland proper in 2014. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Right, so we now move on to a series of historical maps from the Ordnance Survey. Now, the point to make here is what I've done in the next few slides is show the approximate route, claimed route, with a red line. So that's superimposed on the original mapping. And the point here is you can see Rock House by a black blob to the south of the claim route. And what you can also see here is the claim route doesn't exist at this point. It wasn't actually set out till 1971, but there is a parallel track which runs roughly southeast to northwest, just to the north of the red line. So there's a route that effectively performs the same function, but isn't on the same course. May I have the next slide, please? Slide 1E, and this is a slightly later bit of mapping. This is 1903. It's the second edition of the Ordnance Survey County Series. We can see Rock House and what's in fact the southern boundary of the claim route. The character of the area which the route runs is open, unenclosed land. It's effectively rough grazing. Again, we can see the parallel route just to the north of the claim route. Again, making the point that the claim route didn't exist at this time. May I have the next slide, please? More of the same, really. This is 1922, and again, we can see Rock House is like an insular enclosure. We can see the area to the north as unenclosed rough grazing, and we can see by the woodland symbols, Chestnut's enclosure to the west or the left of the slide. May I have the next slide, please? And this is probably a little bit harder to make out. This was the 6-inch to the mile, so it's not as detailed, but it does show essentially the same thing. The claim route is shown by a red line, superimposed on the original mapping. But you have the track running almost parallel, but to the north of it. But there was no evidence for the physical existence of the claim route at this point. May I have the next slide, please? Could I have the next slide, please?
Is it breaking down?
A delay. Might be having a delay there, Andrew.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's the one. Yes.
Yeah.
This is slide 1H. Now, this is a little bit different. As I said in the preamble, the route A to B was created in 1971 when the surrounding line was enclosed and sold by the Forestry Commission to Mr. Adams of Pear Tree Farm. The Pear Tree Farm is at the north of the slide. You may be able to see that on your maps. And it's formerly open land. Now, so A to B was sold to Mr. Adams in 1971, then to the owners of Rock House in 2000. Now, what we do have here, you can see with the cursor, is that A to B, this is 1973, had by that point been set out. So there is a track enclosed on both sides between points A and B, running to the north of Rock House. However, when we get to point B, instead of continuing in a straight line as the claim route does, the map shows a route heading roughly southwards by 2 double peck lines. With this Ordnance Survey mapping, the National Grid series, they mapped physical features that appeared on the ground. There are no rights of way marked on the route. So what it does show us is that there was a physical track between A and B, but no track between B and C, and instead a track going south from point B. May I have the next slide, please?
Can I just check with members? Simon's using a black indicator in the shape of a hand. Are all members picking up the indicator? Can somebody confirm? Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry, Andrew, yeah, carry on.
No, thank you for clarifying. We'll come to the significance of the conveyance during the course of the presentation, but just to make you aware, there was a plan accompanying the conveyance. This was the point where the land to the north, the pink land, was sold off by the Forestry Commission to Mr. Adams, and the track at this point was physically set out between A and B, and it's marked by a blue line, roughly where your cursor is, between points A and B. May I have the next slide, please? Now, here we have the route marked by a blue spot. Now, the purpose of this map is to show what's called Section 16 dedicated land. The map was produced by Natural England. Again, we'll talk about the significance of access land in the 2000 Countryside and Rights of Way Act within the course of the report. But it was the legislation that effectively created what's popularly known as the right to roam. And the point here is that it included the whole of the length A to B to C as Section 16 dedicated land. We'll come back to that during the course of the report. May I have the, I'm not sure if I've reached the end there, or whether we go back to 1B.
We'll go back to 1B.
Yeah.
Okay, bear with me a sec. One B.
Thank you for that, Simon. Much appreciated. Okay, before we go on to consider the report itself, do any of the members have any questions about the content of the slide presentation or any of the maps that have been seen?
Just going to take the sharing off a minute, Anne. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see, Joe, at your end? Any hands up?
Having a look now.
If you to do that with me with the screener.
No, nobody's raised their hand.
Okay, carry on, Andrew.
Thank you. One point on B, by the way, is it does actually show Pear Tree Farm, top middle of the photograph. And that was physically set out as a new farm at that point when the land was sold off. Now, the issues we need to consider with the report are the effect of the 1938 Access Agreement, and we'll come to look at some more detail, and the particular legislation pertaining to the Forest of Dean, and how these affect the acquisition of rights. We'll also be looking at how rights come into being over Section A to B following the disposal of the land by the Forestry Commission in 1971. Another thing we have to consider is, do the restrictions and stipulations contained within the 1971 schedule which sold off the land prevent the acquisition of rights by the public? Another issue we'll be looking at is, does the designation of the whole length of the path as access land in the 2000 Crow Act, which commenced on 31st of January 2001, prevent rights coming to being through long user? And finally, is there sufficient evidence of long use to infer dedication? So those are the things we have to sort of look at in more detail. Now, what I'll start firstly is looking at the effect of the statutory forest. Now, if you turn to your reports, this is set out in more detail between paragraphs 14.8 and 14.16. It's from the legal comments and conclusions. And obviously, councillors have had the opportunity to read the report, so I won't dwell too much on the exact details. But we have two bits of legislation, which is the Dean Forest Reforestation Act of 1667, which was largely reenacted in the Dean Forest Timber Act of 1808, which the Forestry Commission considered to prevent rights from coming to being through use, because they're excuse me, cough there. The other thing we need to look at is the National Forest Park Committee report of 1938, and that's set out in 1412. Now, the important thing here is the Forestry Commission's view on this is that access to the forest is regulated and controlled by the Acts and also by the Forestry Commission bylaws. They argued under these circumstances it would be impossible to show an implied intention to dedicate on the part of the Crown and the statutory forests since that date, that is to say 1938. What the National Forest Park Committee effectively did, and their success as the Forestry Commission, was grant the public a permissive right to wander over the Forest of Dean. Now, this means that any use is by right as opposed to as of right, and because it's permissive, cannot give rise to a right through long user. The area covered by the 1938 report actually extends further than statutory Forest of Dean. This doesn't concern us with this report, because this area is also part of the statutory Forest of Dean. Now, so that's, I think the important thing here is to hold that distinction between sections A to B and B to C. Now, A to B, because it was disposed of by the Forestry Commission in 1971, it means that the clock effectively can run from that point in terms of deemed dedication. So it would be possible, subject to the terms of the conveyance and subject obviously to it being designated as access land, for rights to have come into being through long user after 1971. Now, with B to C, it's a different matter, because B to C has remained in the Forestry Commission's control, it remains Crown land, and the framework of the forest laws and the 1938 report has the effect of preventing rights from coming to being through long use, because the right is, sorry, there is a permission effectively for people to use the land on foot. So for this reason, the recommendation of the officers is the claim of the section B to C be refused. Now, so as I said, it is possible for rights to arise through deemed dedication over to A to B since 1971, but we need to look at that restrictive covenant in the 71 conveyance. We also have to take a closer look at the effect of it being all designated as access lands under the 2000 Crow Act. Now, if we have a look at the covenant, which is set out in paragraph 8.5 of the report, so that's in the background section. Remember, we saw the plan of this, which was at 1I, which showed the land disposed of in pink and the claim route between A and B in blue. And what the conveyance says is, in particular to the rights of way at all times and for all purposes as heretofore enjoyed over the southern track A to B, A B is in brackets, crossing the said property which is coloured blue on the said plan for the benefit of A, the owners and occupiers for the time being of rockhouse sheds, also known as bankhouse sheds, and B, the general public. The covenant restrictions and stipulations contained in the schedule bind any successors and titles. They don't just cover the immediate time, they run in perpetuity. The view of the officers here is that the way this is worded is very much like a sort of general conveyance of property, in that it reserves any existing rights. It doesn't sort of specify particular rights. So our view, it's not considered the wording of this conveyance prevents a right of way from coming into being over section A to B through subsequent long user. Now, if we then turn to the issue of access land, the right to roam allows the public to enter and remain on open access land for the purposes of open air recreation. Now, If you turn to paragraph 1420 of your report, and again, this is within the legal comments and conclusions, and we're looking at the effect of the Bilson case. I know this has come up in previous reports, I think back in December. And just quickly go through the contents of 1420 and the Bilson case in 1998. And as regards access land and the right to roam, any use would normally operate as conditional permission to use the land and as such prevent presumed dedication under Section 31 of the Highways Act 1980. However, use of the claimed paths for reasons other than for air and exercise could succeed. And again, in 1420, there's a quote from the Bilson case, which says, if a track across a common is not used for the purpose of air and exercise, but is being used by the public for some other purpose, as a route between points A and B, for example, from a village across a common to a nearby school, church, or railway station, then in principle, such usage of the track is capable of establishing a right-of-way over it under Section 31 of the 1980 Act. So, if we apply this ruling, and if we consider the path A to B was being used not for the purposes of air and exercise, but to travel from the highway at point A along a defined route to reach a place of popular resort, in this case Chestnuts Enclosure, then this use could be considered capable of satisfying a claim. We also consider that the section of claim path A to B has the character of a track and gives access to an area of land used for air and exercise, namely Chestnuts Enclosure. The path A to B, although dedicated as access land, is not in itself a destination. It simply gives access to the destination. Now, another thing we have to consider with what in effect would be a cul-de-sac path is further requirement for a claim of presumed dedication is that a path joins a highway at both its start and end points, or connects with the highway at its start point and with the place of what's termed a popular resort at the other. Public user cannot give rise to a resumption of dedication if it doesn't. The section of path A to B connects to a highway at its eastern end, Class 4 road, and to a place of popular resort at its western end, which is an area of access land which the public has a right to air and exercise under Section 16 of the 2000 Countryside and Rights of Way Act. Now, if we consider that rights can come into being through long user between point A to B, despite it being recorded as access land, we now have to look at whether there's sufficient evidence to infer that deemed dedication. User evidence is set out in section 10 of the report, and it's summarised in Appendix C. Now, the application was supported by 9 evidence forms. Now, nearly all of those forms were of people living in the vicinity of the claimed route, so all within the immediate community. Use in all cases was on foot, for leisure purposes, to give access to Chestnuts Woods, to Welshbury, which is the area of woodland to the north of Chestnuts Enclosure, and also to Green Bottom, which is the area beyond. Now, important point here is, of course, the path A to B only came into being in 1971. Now, there are a number of evidence forms that refer to use prior to this time, and we can only infer that they refer to the parallel track that ran close to the claim route before the land was enclosed under the 71 conveyance. There's no bringing into question in this case, or any evidence that use has been challenged in any way. Use by the public has been free and without hindrance. One thing that the 2006 Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act, or the NERC Act, allows us is in the absence of a challenge, we can take the application as the date of challenge. In this case, we had an application that was put in at the end of 2005, and then was resubmitted at the beginning of 2006. We can take either date, but if we take 2005, there are 3 witnesses who have used the path for a full 20 years, another for 19 years, and also used by Mr. Jones and Mr. Parker, which, although isn't dated, we can infer from the comments made, it seems to date from the setting out of the path in 1971. Now, in terms of the tests we apply to user evidence, use should be by a number of people who together may sensibly be taken to represent the community. And I refer you to paragraph 14.32 here, which refers to a case. Coleridge makes comments in the Queen versus Southampton Inhabitants of 1887 and says that user by the public must not be taken in its widest sense, for it is common knowledge that in many cases only the local residents ever use a particular road or bridge. So in this case, the users are all from Pope's Hill, and the point we're making here is essentially that there are going to be certain paths that have a local usage, and that just because the use is by a given community rather than the wider community outside that rural village, it isn't a hindrance to rights of way coming to being through long use. So to summarise, the effect of the National Forest Park Committee Foresterdene report in 1938 is that any subsequent use of a section of the path within Chestnut's enclosure, that's B to C, on foot would be by permission. So it's not considered on balance of probabilities that this section of path has been dedicated as a highway. The section of claim path between A and B did not physically exist until 1971, and the conveyance document of that date reserved a right of way at all times and for all purposes for the benefit of the owners of Rockhouse Sheds, Rockhouse, and the general public. However, we consider the wording of this conveyance, because of its general nature, doesn't prevent a right of way coming to being through long use. We also look at the access land designation, and although the section of claim route A to B has been designated as access under the section 16 of the 2000 Pro Act, allowing a general right of air and exercise, it is considered this section of the claim route is not a destination in itself, and forms part of a defined route giving access to a place of popular resort. Following on from the Bilson ruling, it is considered that long user on foot is capable of establishing a right of way under section 31 of the 1980 Highways Act. Now, to conclude, looking at the weight of evidence we have, is sufficient that we can infer that dedication has taken place. That concludes the presentation. So I think the councillors have any questions concerning the content of the report or any contact made.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, but we all know the form by now. If members use their raise the hand feature if they have questions. I'm just waiting to see if there are questions.
Yeah, I'm just checking, Chair. Councillor John Payne has raised his hand.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. It was fascinating. The interesting thing is that for it to be a right of way, there needs to be a destination. And as point B to C is still under the control of the Forestry Commission, could point B in itself not be considered a destination?
Andrew?
So, thank you, Councillor Payne. Sorry, a bit slow pushing the mute button or the unmute button. It's a good question, and I think it's central to consideration of this application. Now, what happened when 2000 Countryside Rights of Way Act came in? It designated areas to which the public had a right to fresh air and exercise, and what's termed access land or the term right to roam is used. Now, this normally included things like commons and land over a certain height, with essentially sort of a mountainous land, land over 600 feet. I can't remember exactly. This was mapped by Natural England at the time. Now, the Forestry Commission, at that point, because they had this sort of long-standing access agreement over most of their land, but it wasn't being used for actually growing timber, they took the opportunity under Section 16 of the Act to dedicate land as access land. So although the legislation excludes forestry land generally, the Forestry Commission opted to have their land designated as access land. So this means that as well as the the permissive right to wander on foot over the Forest of Dean, which dates from 1938, this sort of encapsulates it in law by giving the public a right to fresh air and exercise over Forestry Commission land in the Forest of Dean, because it's now recorded also as access land. So the point here is that with a place of resort, there's been I'll go back to, sorry, going a bit round the houses here, but with a place of resort, essentially it's a place where the public legitimately has an interest in going to. So it might be perhaps the end of a street where someone lives. The most traditional ones are a seashore or to a beauty spot, or to look like a lookout point or whatever, top of a hill is one of the trips that fits in that category. Now, in this case, we consider that point B fits the category of a place of popular resort, because what happens when you get to B is that you have a right enshrined in law to then wander over the land beyond B, through all of Chestnut's closure, and
Sounds playing a Andrew, you're having problems. We might have to pause a second, then backwind. Can you make a note where you'd got to if you can hear us? Yeah, it looks like we've lost you. Members, if you can hang on a sec, we'll Joe?
Yeah, should we pause the meeting and adjourn until we get Andrew back online?
Yeah.
That's by far the best thing to do, because of those that are watching online. If we could take 5 minutes, and we'll get Andrew back online. Can I ask members?
Andrew's there actually.
Hello,
Can you?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
I think I've resolved the problem, so I should be able to continue.
Okay. Could you go back, if you know where you are now? Could you go back perhaps 2 paragraphs, because you started to break up in.
Of course I can. Yes, that's no problem whatsoever.
Thank you.
Yeah, a rather long-winded preamble there, talking about access land and also places of popular resort. Yep. Essentially, you can have a cul-de-sac park if it leads to a place where the public legitimately want to reach. And examples traditionally have been things like beauty spots, top of a hill, seashore. It could be like the end of a no-through road where there are houses. Now, in this case, we consider that point B does represent a place where the public legitimately would like to reach, because it opens up an area of land which they have a legal right to take fresh air and exercise in. So it's sort of leading somewhere, and it's leading onto a large area of Forestry Commission land over which they can wander, and they have a legal right to do so. So for this reason, we consider it does meet the criteria of being a place of popular resort. Now, does that cover the bits I
Absolutely.
yeah?
unless a member indicates that they're confused, but I certainly think you got pretty much back to where we lost you. Okay. Yep, carry on. That was in your response to John, or have you completed your response to John?
Sorry. Yes, unless John has any further questions, I hope that sort of clarifies the issue, but do come back to me, please, with a supplementary question.
No, it absolutely clarifies it. I'm quite happy with that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And we're in questions. Any other member? I'm looking for any.
Councillor Brian Robinson has raised his hand.
Yes, Brian. Yeah, okay.
Mine wasn't a question, really, so if there's questions, I'll wait.
Okay. Anyone else indicating?
No one else.
No one else. But if there are no more questions, then I'm getting to the stage where I'm looking for a proposal.
I'm happy to put a proposal forward, Chair.
Yeah, carry on, Brian.
Yeah, what I wanted to contribute was actually the discussion was about I think whether Point B and Chestnut Woods could be considered a destination, and I think it is a very popular woodland area, so certainly people would be wanting to access it for that purpose, and I'm sure some of those go along Route A to B for that purpose. So I think I would be happy to move the recommendation that we do designate Point A to B. Obviously, we can't designate B to C, so that's my proposal.
Okay. I'm looking for a seconder. Yes, John. Do you want to speak, John?
No, I'm just happy to second the proposal.
Graham.
Okay. We've got a proposition seconded. We're into the realms of debate now then, Graham?
No, I just to indicate the second it, I would be happy to second it as a forester chair.
Okay. Okay. Is anyone else indicating to speak? Wave at the screen because I don't always pick up the hands if they're. No. No one, Joe?
No.
Okay. We go to the motion as proposed. For those online, we have a way of doing this, and it looks like a recorded vote. Democratic Services will now take over and take a vote of members in alphabetical order normally. So over to Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So just to make clear then for members of the public watching on YouTube, so the proposal is, as per the report, moved by Councillor Brian Robinson, seconded by Councillor John Caldwell, and that recommendation in the report is that an order be made to add a length of public footpath to the definitive map and statement between points A and B, as shown on the map at 1B that has been put on the screen and is in the papers of the meeting, and that the application to add a length of public footpath between points B and C, as shown on the map 1B, be refused. So that's what everyone's voting on. So what I'm going to do is go through everybody in turn alphabetically. Can you clearly say for, against, or abstain? So starting with you, Carol Alloway Martin.
For.
Thank you, Carol. For. Councillor John Caldwell.
For.
Thank you, John. For. Councillor Graham Morgan.
For.
Thanks, Graham. For. Councillor Lorraine Patrick.
For.
Thanks, Lorraine. For. Councillor John Payne.
For.
Thanks, John. For. Councillor Brian Robinson.
For.
Thanks, Brian. For. Councillor Robert Vines.
For.
Thank you, Robert. For. Councillor Simon Wheeler.
For.
Thanks, Simon. For. Councillor Phil Orford.
For.
Thanks, Phil. For. So that is unanimous. Therefore, the recommendation in the report is carried.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the second application, I'm minded It will be quite lengthy. I'm going to take 5 minutes now for a quick comfort break, or possibly maybe start bang on 11. That might suit. Where are we?
Yeah, that was good.
That's 9 minutes. Yeah. If members can mute, don't stop it, don't switch off. Stay connected, and we'll start again at 11. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I presume we're streaming. We've gone to our second agenda item, and we got the right name under the right person now. Jackie, are you ready to do your presentation? Thank you.
Okay. Hello, councillors. My application for your determination today pertains to a relatively short length of public footpath in the hamlet of Yorkley within the parish of West Dean. If I could ask you, Simon, to go to the first slide, which is JH1. Are you here? Can you hear me? Has something gone wrong with the feed? All right, thank you. Okay, so the path that we're looking at then is, as I said, within the hamlet of Yorkley, and it connects an existing public footpath, RWD 10A, with Kidnall's Wood. You can see that the path that's subject to the application is found within the red box on that screen, JH1. And now the application was submitted, we received it in July of 2017. We have no documentary evidence whatsoever in association with this application, so you'll be making your determination purely on the analysis of the user evidence. Now the path itself, while we have this slide up, sits on land for which the ownership has been unclear for many years. It forms part of the 180-acre Yorkley Court estate. And as I said, the ownership's been very unclear, to the point where a public notice dated the 1st of October 2018 was submitted or placed in the London Gazette under Section 27 of the Trustees Act 1925, seeking surviving family members connected to 23 deceased people with links to this property. Meanwhile, over the years, the land has been leased via a trust to a succession of tenant farmers until December 2014, when Land Registry indicates that the land was sold with possessory title to Yorkley Court Farm Limited. So that's a little bit of the background to the ownership of this, the land and the path that crosses it. With regard to the user evidence, we have 35 public path evidence forms that have been submitted by 35 individuals. So perhaps we can take a closer look at the path that's claimed. Could you go to JH2, please, Simon? Thank you. So the path that's claimed runs between the points A and B. You'll see that the path at point A links to RWD 10A, which is an existing public footpath. Now that's quite an important thing to remember, because as you'll see in the report later on, that length of path there was diverted in 1976, and that does have an effect on this report. Point B connects to Kidnall's Wood, which has been in the ownership of the Forestry Commission, and as Andrew has gone into quite a lot of detail, has enjoyed since 1938 a right of permissive access for anyone walking through it. So that's the background. Now, before we go into the photos, which is the next series of slides, I just asked you to have a look at this slide more closely. You'll see that just below the box where it says JH2, it says cattle grid. Now, the first two pictures, the first two photos that I'm going to be showing you are taken from the existing footpath. So we're not automatically starting with the claim path itself, and that again will be relevant later on in the report. So Simon, could you swap to the next slide, please? Thank you. So here we've got the cattle grid. We're not at point A, we're beyond point A. You can see the route of the existing public footpath, RWD 10A, running to the left of the post and rail fencing. This section of path is the bit that was diverted in 1976. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We're still on the route here of RWD 10A. And we have a kissing gate here, which has been installed recently and replaced a stile, which again we will see is referred to in the user evidence. But there is absolutely no conflict here between the landowner and the applicant. This kissing gate and the stile before it were to facilitate access along the existing path of RWD 10A, and they're not to facilitate access along the claim path. So next slide, please. This is the start, this is point A. So this is just in front of the kissing gate. If you turn around at this point, you'd be looking at the kissing gate. And RWD 10A would go left from this point along the field boundary. Now this is the start of the path. And the path actually runs parallel, not close up to, the applicant hasn't shown the path close up to the field boundary, the field edge. It's a few metres out into the field. So we're looking at the start of this path, and I draw your attention to two things here. Firstly, the top rail of wire. If you look, cast your eye to the right, to the bit around the fence post, and then as it's going along the, the boundary with the property, you'll see that there are barbs. It was a barbed wire fence. Now, if you look at the section at point A across the path, you'll see that the barbs have been removed, which may suggest that people were trying to continue using the path. The second point I'd like you to note is the condition of the fence itself, the wire fence. So Simon, not that bit there, it's point A, the fence itself. My reason for saying that is it's not bent out of shape, it's not damaged in any way. Now, a second point that is not disputed between the applicant or the landowner is that this fence was installed in January of 2017. This photo, the whole series of photos that I'm showing you, were taken 2 years later in the same month, January 2019. So again, that could suggest that since the fencing went up, this path hasn't enjoyed a lot of use because the fence is just not bent out of shape. Can I have the next slide, please, Simon? Now, this is the other end of the path. This is point B. So we're looking at Kidnall's Wood from here in the ownership of the Forestry Commission. Now again, Land Registry indicates that both from the documents pertaining to the Forestry Commission and also the documents held by Land Registry for the landowner Walkley Court Farm Limited, this is the field boundary. This is their the boundary between the two properties. Now you'll see that the fence is in quite a bad condition, and where you can see the log that is on the ground, there is just no fencing at all. It's fallen into such get my teeth. I'll start again. There is just nothing there. The fence has fallen into such disrepair that there is nothing to impede access into the wood at this point B. So the next slide, please, Simon. This photo is just taken from the other side of the fence from the last photo, and I was hoping I might be able to show a little bit more clearly that beyond that fence panel that's lying on the ground, there is no fence at all, just to show how bad it is. Can I ask for the next slide, please, Simon? Now, so what we're saying here is that the fence that you can see to the left of this photo is the original field boundary that is not disputed, again, between the landowner, either landowner. This is the boundary that is recorded by Land Registry as the boundary between the two bits of land. So this is point B, but you'll see that there is a new fence that has been installed similar to the one at point A by the new landowner, Yorkley Court Farm Limited. So the path that we'll be considering is from point A through the new fence here that has been installed by the landowner to point B, to the fence, the original fence boundary on the left. I think that is the end of the photos. Is there another? Yes. Okay. Right. So those are the ends of the photos. You've seen the character of the path. Now, as you would expect, we carried out a consultation exercise in December of 2018. We received 3 representations in total. The first 2 were from the local county councillor and from the district council, and their reports, their responses can be found in paragraphs 10.2 and 10.3 respectively of the report. We won't go into those because they don't actually provide much that helps in any way, doesn't have much bearing. The third response was submitted by representatives of the landowner, the Yorkley Court Farm Limited. Now, their whole letter, their whole response can be found at Appendix JH4 within the report. It was quite a long response, so what I've done in this slide is I've used their own subheadings and precede the points of objection underneath them. So if we can go through them then. The landowner's objections firstly are failure to challenge the fence or submit a timely application. Within that, they said that the fence was installed in January 2017, but their consultation letter wasn't received. Sorry, it wasn't received until December 2017. Can I just check something a moment, please? Yes, can I just register that should be reading December 2018, not 2017. That threw me for a little bit. So they were concerned that from their installation of the fence in January 2017, they weren't consulted until nearly 2 years later, the end of December 2018. The second point under that is why did the landowner or why did the applicant not go direct to the landowner and raise their concerns about the fencing that had gone up? And then the second point, really the third point, which ties in really with the first, is that they felt it was unfair that the applicant seemingly had 2 years to put their case together, whereas the landowner only had a couple of months as part of the consultation. The second point to their objection was the background to the application. They were concerned that they felt that individuals that had supplied evidence in support of this application were also linked to earlier litigation. Now this refers to the Yorkley Community Farm. Some of you may have heard about it over the years, but it was a group of individuals who set up camp, set up home on this land, and for a number of years worked the land, lived there, but it ended up in them being evicted in March 2016. Point C of the landowner's objection is rebuttal witness evidence. Quite simply, they said the representatives of the landowner said that local farmers, tenants and contractors were unaware of anyone using the path. Point D, they actually supplied, and you'll find these in the as part of the objector's paperwork under JH4, they supplied 8 aerial photographs covering a period of 1999 to 2018. And they said quite simply that the path is not visible in any of them. And then the last point that they raised, point E, is the unviability of the location of the alleged footpath. They basically said that the path doesn't match up to any known points, entry points in Kidnall's Wood, and it can't be seen on the ground. And they had no evidence of a stile at point B. So that's the landowner's objections. What I'd like to do now is go to the next slide which is the applicant's responses to these points. So there are some points in here that are comments from GCC, some of the comments that we have added to the applicant's response. So going first to the first subheading, failure to challenge fence or submit a timely application. It's true, the fencing went up in January 2017, that's not disputed. The application was submitted in July 2017 and it was sent by recorded delivery both to GCC and the landowner. And it wasn't picked up by GCC. We didn't start to process it until December of 2018, which is when we did the consultation. So the landowner is mistaken in that the applicant didn't have 2 years to put their case together. It was a case of the process. The application was submitted in July. We picked it up in December of the following year. Now, with regard to why didn't the applicant go straight to the landowner, with regard to the fencing that was installed in January 2017, well, I'll refer to the words used by the applicant herself. She said that she didn't contact the landowner due to previous history of intimidation of walkers. She also referred to a conviction of assault by beating of a member of the public that tried to use one of the existing rights of way in April 2017. So I don't think we have to go on any further under that one. It's a case of the applicant didn't feel that she could contact the landowner direct. Now, with regard to the second point, the background to the application, the fact that some individuals may have submitted user evidence in support of this application and were also involved in this previous litigation which resulted in the eviction of the community farm is absolutely irrelevant. You'll know from training that the only thing that you can consider in making your determination is whether there is sufficient evidence to show that highway rights have come into being. So issues such as suitability, desirability, even safety can't be considered. And that really is the answer here. This issue with regard to any previous litigation is irrelevant. Point C, the rebuttal witness evidence. This is where the landowner suggested that no farmer, tenant or contractor had seen anyone using the path. That's a statement that's been made by the representative of the landowner. What we don't have is any first-hand evidence or statements from anyone to that effect. The applicant under this one also suggested that it may have been, they may not have been seen because the claim path, it's the location of the claim path, it's the furthest end of the field and it's shielded by trees. And also the fact that maybe people were using the path early in the morning or after work, so outside sort of office hours, although you can't really use that phrase with regard to farmers. So have a look at the next one, historic aerial photographs, the next point. The representatives of the landowner are absolutely correct. The photographs that have been sent and submitted to us, the 8 covering the period of 1999 to 2018, none of them show the path. What I would suggest, however, is that the photos of 1999, 2005, 2006 and 2010 are of quite poor quality. They're quite blurred, don't have a sharp focus. I'd also suggest that the 2006 photo appears to show the field following a hay cut, and the 2013, 14, 17 and 18 photos show a ploughed field. Now, if you remember from the start of this application, we said that the applicant hadn't shown a path hugging the field edge. They were a few metres away into the field. So this could potentially have obliterated use of the path. So although the applicant is absolutely right, none of those photos show any use. there could be reasons for that based on the photographs that have been submitted. And I'll just add one other thing here, which is our response, GCC's response to this, and that is that if you remember the photograph, sorry, not the photograph, the plan of the claim path running between points A and B, there was an existing public footpath, RWD 10A, which also crossed that field, and that path isn't shown either in any of those photographs. The last point then that was raised by the representatives of the landowner is the unviability of the location of the alleged path. They questioned the style at point B. Well, we will see from the user evidence that we have people, members of the public, that actually remember seeing it in place, but it's just rotted away. The representatives also used the phrase that they considered the wood to be dense and established. Now, you saw the photos of the wood, of Kidnall's wood. I will leave it up to you as to whether you consider that it was so dense and established that it was impossible to walk through, which is what is really being inferred. All I can say is that when I did my inspection in 2019, I didn't have a problem walking through it. Now, the landowner, the applicant also mentioned at this point that there was historically a path that went into Kidnall's Wood via Shap House Farm, now known today as Deanwood Holiday House. And that path was closed off, and this path that's being claimed today, section A to B, is really a replacement for that original path. If you could go to the next slide, please, Simon, I'll be able to go into a little bit more detail. So the applicant is absolutely right. You have an application before you to determine an application for a path to be added by means of a modification order. There was in 1990, there was another modification order claim, and that was for the route that is highlighted red on the slide that you can see. So A to B to C to D, that was the route that was claimed in 1990. Now, it was rejected by your predecessors in October of 1991, the Rights of Way subcommittee, for three main reasons. The first reason is that point C to D, I'm going to make reference now to all that Andrew said with regard to access. Since 1938, the Forestry Commission granted the public access to the statutory forest of Dean and the satellite woods, one of which was named as Kidnall's Wood. If you remember, Andrew referred to the report that was prepared by the Forestry Commissioners in 1938, and this wood was specifically mentioned as being managed by them and being included in the access arrangement. So as such, the points between C and D would be used by permission and therefore would fail the as of right test that we'll go on to consider under the user evidence, and that would defeat a claim. The second point was that there were only 5 members of the public, 5 user evidence forms that were submitted, and the committee at that time felt it was insufficient. The third reason is, do you remember right at the very start of the photos, the first 2 photos showed the route of the existing public footpath, RWD 10A. That path was subject to a diversion in 1976, and the route that was diverted is the section that Simon is highlighting between points A to E to F. So the route that is coloured blue on that slide. As a result, 14 years later, when the modification order was submitted, the path the claimed path A, B, C and D no longer had a connection to a highway. And as Andrew told you in his report, one of the requirements for a successful application is there must be a termination point either at a highway or a place of popular resort. As it didn't, that was the third reason that this application was refused and rejected. Now, as a result, with the rejection of that, it's not unreasonable to suggest that people who wanted to have access still into Kidnall's Wood would have found another way of so doing. And therefore, we have this route, this claim path today, A to B. Now, we have no documentary evidence, and so what we'll do now is we'll consider the user evidence in support of this claim. Now, the statutory test for this user evidence against which we would have to analyse the forms that we've had, the user evidence forms, is found at section 31, 1 and 2 of the Highways Act 1980. It's detailed in paragraphs 14.1 and 2 of your report, but what I thought I'd do is just remind you of the test. It's one that we read out every single time, but it states that where a way over any land, other than a way of such character that use of it by the public could not give rise at common law to any presumption of dedication, has been actually enjoyed by the public as of right, without forced secrecy or permission, and without interruption for a full period of 20 years, the way is deemed to have been dedicated as a highway, unless there is sufficient evidence that there was no intention during that period to dedicate it. And then in point 2, there is clarification of the 20 years that we have to analyse. And the 20 years is to be calculated retrospectively from the date when the right of the public to use the way is brought into question. So let's take that last bit first and consider when the claimed route or use of the claimed route was brought into question. There doesn't appear to be much dispute. As I've said, there is no challenge, no dispute. The fencing went up in January of 2017. And in the application submitted in July, the applicant stated, and I'm reading from paragraph 14.4, the farm has now been sold and the present owner has been very anti-walker since he took over. The footpath used 40 years by local people to get into the top of the woods has now been fenced off and cannot be used. For the purpose of this report, therefore, and for the purpose of analysing the user evidence, I've taken the 20-year qualifying period of use to be 1997 to 2017, which is when the fence was installed. Now, it could be stated, you could question, well, hang on a minute, there's no landowner. You just said at the start of this presentation, there hasn't been a landowner for many years. So, you know, how fair is that? But if we look again at section 31, we look at the test of the user evidence. It doesn't refer to a landowner being deemed to have dedicated the path as a highway if the test is fulfilled. It refers to a way being deemed to have been dedicated, i.e. irrespective of the existence or non-existence of a person capable of dedicating the way. And therefore, the fact that there hasn't been a known landowner for many years would not preclude this application from being considered. Now further, as I briefly said earlier on, and as Andrew went into in quite a lot of detail, we need to have termination points, either to a highway or to a place of popular resort. The question is Kidnall's Wood, does it constitute a place of popular resort? We can say quite easily, without going through all the explanation, the legal explanation that Andrew gave you. Since 1938, the Forestry Commission have allowed members of the public to have access over their statutory Forest of Dean and their satellite woods, one of which is this one, Kidnall's Wood. And as Andrew also said, since 2000, this land has been designated as Section 16 dedicated land under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000. So those two together do provide the evidence to show that Kidnall's Wood does indeed constitute a place of popular resort, and again, this application can succeed. So let's have a look at the extent and nature of the claimed use. Simon, could you go to the last slide, please?
Numbers.
Thank you. Thanks. Right, so we have 35 user evidence forms submitted by 35 individual members of the public. Now, I haven't actually put on this slide on this PowerPoint presentation the summary of user evidence forms. That is found at JH7 within your report, but it complements this bar chart of use. We have 35 members of the public that claim use of this path A to B going back to 1950 on foot. Now, on this bar chart of use, this slide that you're looking at, you'll see that there is a red line on the marking the 20 years of use. Remember, as part of the test, we have to show that there has been use over that period. We actually have 15 members of the public that claim use of the whole 20 years. We have 35 that claim use of part of that period, but we have 15 that claim use of the whole period. Now, with regard to frequency of use, unsurprisingly, we have 5 that claim daily use. We have 19 that claim weekly use, 5 that claim monthly use, and then a further 6 claim infrequent use. The summary as found at JH7 indicates that the path was used mainly for the purpose of dog walking, leisure or fitness. Now, so we've considered the use, the 20 years, we've considered use by the public. What about the use as of right, is there any evidence of use by force, secrecy or permission? The easy answer to say that is no. When we look at the summary of user evidence forms, we can see that all of the applicants noted no to the questions about gates, notices, obstructions, and in fact, if I can, I don't know whether you can look it up very easily, but number 12, the applicant that I've got there is a Mr. Brown, was one of quite a few, who also went further and said that they didn't feel that permission was needed. So we can say then that there is no evidence that use was by force, secrecy or permission, and therefore we can say it was as of right. Now the user evidence members of the public refer to a stile at point A and a stile at point B along the route. As we've said, the stile at point A, there actually isn't a dispute between the landowner and the applicant. The stile at point A was to facilitate access along the existing public right-of-way, RWD 10A. So that explains why some members of the public filling in user evidence forms have mentioned a stile and others haven't. The stile was not only in position there, but there was fencing alongside, and the whole thing, it appears, was falling apart. People could just walk past it. They didn't need to have the stile there. So some people have mentioned it, others just haven't bothered. With regard to the stile at point B, it's very similar. We've got 13 members of the public that recorded its existence, and at least 3 remember us seeing it actually there in situ. There is some reference to the Forestry Commission carrying out tree thinning, and the stile, the tree limb or branch fell on the stile, but however, it's obviously fallen into disrepair and it's disappeared over the years, it's no longer there. But again, as we saw from the photos, the original fence line there has fallen into such disrepair by itself, there is absolutely nothing to stop members of the public from just walking freely into Kidnall's Wood, stile or not. So when we look at the user evidence that we have submitted, the 35 members of the public have claimed use of the path over part or all of the path over the 20-year period. They've done it as of right without any interruption, and therefore their user evidence would support a case for deemed dedication as a public footpath. However, we now then have to turn to the other side and consider whether there's an evidence of sufficient lack of intention to dedicate a public right-of-way by the landowner. Now, what we ought to just remember at this point is that the landowner, the current landowner, Yorkley Court Farm Limited, purchased the land in December 2014. So when we look at the qualifying period of 1997 to 2017, we are looking at their ownership, their interest lasting for a period of 3 years of that period. However, what are we looking at when we consider, when we think of the phrase, this lack of intention to dedicate? Well, in these reports, we always turn to the case law of God Manchester 2007. And in that, a statement was made to explain the lack of intention to dedicate that a landowner must show. It said, in order for there to be sufficient evidence there was no intention to dedicate the way, there must be evidence of some overt acts on the part of the landowner, such as to show the public at large, the people who use the path, that he had no intention to dedicate. So what have we got? When we look at the landowner's representation, we have, first of all, the statement that no farmer, tenant or contractor has seen anyone using the path. Well, that's not overt action and it's not first-hand evidence. We have the aerial photographs that don't show the path, but for that again, we saw that some of them weren't great quality and there could be other reasons that the path wasn't shown. For instance, when the photo was taken, it could have been just after ploughing and not seeing the path. But what overt action has the landowner actually taken himself over that period that he had of 3 years? Well, when we look back at the summary of the user evidence, they all responded no to gates, notices, fencing, verbal notice, and also, verbal, no permission needed. So there is no overt action that the landowner has shown to date of action that he was taking to show members of the public that he had no intention to dedicate the path. So, as a conclusion then, on the balance of probability, the user evidence that we have suggests that the claimed section of path between A to B has been enjoyed by the public on foot as of right without interruption or challenge for a period in excess of 20 years prior to the fencing of 2017, when the rights of the public were called into question. On the other side, it is submitted that although the landowner has suggested that there is no evidence on the ground, that various people in their employ have not seen anyone using the path, and even myself, I have to suggest that there doesn't appear to have been any or much use of the path since the fencing went up. That was shown by the condition of the fencing in the photos. There is insufficient evidence of overt action that the landowner took directed at the members of the public, the individuals using the path, to shout, "I'm not dedicating this path as a highway." And as a result, it's submitted, therefore, that this section of path does subsist and it should be protected now by being recognised on the definitive map as a public footpath. And therefore, my recommendation is that an order should be made to add the length of public footpath between points A and B to the legal record of public rights of way.
Thank you. Is that you concluded then, Jackie?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can I then go to members in relation to questions at this point? If you can use your button to indicate, raise a hand.
I'm just checking, Chair. I can't see that anybody's raised their hand.
Really? Okay.
I'll just stop sharing. Bear with me.
No, nobody's raised their hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor.
Simon Wheeler
My buttons all disappeared. My apologies.
and Lorraine.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I took so long to answer. It was using the iPad. It was trying to find the button as opposed to using my computer. However, I was just a little bit confused, and I don't think it should make any difference to the way I vote. But it was looking back on the slide, JH3B, the kissing gate. I'm just assuming we've come. It was just the angle, because the path up the kissing gate seems to turn round to the right, whereas so exactly where is that kissing gate? Because the claimed path, sorry, the path goes round. Yes, the claimed path would go to the right, whereas RWD 10 would go round to the left. So I'm just trying to see the relevance of the kissing gate. You know, what path is that? Was it going from to, etc.?
The relevance of the kissing gate was really to highlight the fact that it was a replacement for a stile that sat there beforehand. If I don't know whether you could go, Simon, go back to the photo of the kissing gate, but if I describe, perhaps I should have described more thoroughly where the route of the path was. So walking towards that kissing gate, we're on the public footpath, RWD 10A. There is a dog leg at that point. At the end of that hedge, you'd walk past the hedge, so through the kissing gate, past the hedge, and then you turn left. But you're actually
right.
No, left.
Yeah.
You see? Yeah, left. Yes. So the claim path goes straight on, and the path would go left. But the whole point of that kissing gate really was just to show that at that point, or in that approximate location, historically there was a stile. But both structures, as I said a few times, there's no dispute. There's no dispute at all. That stile, the structure there, was to facilitate access to the existing path.
Jackie, can you identify it on the map, the kissing gate that's there now?
It's really, I suppose, to the northwest of point A. It's hugging the building. Yes, about there, somewhere about there.
Okay. Right. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Thanks very much. It was just it seemed a little bit confusing, but
sorry,
it didn't seem to make any difference to the rights and wrongs of the path. To make sure I was 100%. Yeah.
It was the other point as well. I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that that was the section of path that was diverted in 1976.
Okay, Lorraine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just have I'm trying to find it now. Applicant's response to landowner's objection, 12.1. Is it 12.1? No, 12.2. Regarding why none of us felt able to contact and citing previous history of intimidation. Would not this previous history of intimidation go towards suggesting that the landowner didn't want people using that particular piece of footpath or what have you?
No, because the applicant confirmed that the intimidation, the assault, was for people using the existing path, of trying to use the existing path. It wasn't the claimed path.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member?
Just ask it, Simon, could you lower your hand? Is that all right? Sorry.
I can't hear.
Can't see anybody else, Chair.
Okay.
Can we get Simon to lower his hand? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Moving along then, if there's no more questions, I've come to the stage in proceedings where I look for a proposal. Is there a proposal from any member?
Looking. Simon.
I'm prepared to propose that path as officers recommend.
Thank you, Simon. Seconder? Anyone to indicate?
If we've got a seconder. John Payne.
John Payne, yeah. Yeah. John, are you seconding?
Yeah.
Yes, I was, Chair.
Okay. Then we have a proposer and a seconder. I'm going into debate now. Is there anything members wish to debate before we move to a vote on the proposal?
Just checking.
Not seeing any hands.
No, nor me.
Well, in that case, we move on to the vote, and the format will be the same as we used on the previous application. I'll now hand over to Simon from Democratic Services to take the vote. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So just to recap then, for those of you watching on YouTube, the members will be voting on the recommendation in the report, and that recommendation is that an order be made to add the claim footpath to the legal record of public rights of way on the basis of the user evidence supplied. And that recommendation has been moved by Councillor Simon Wheeler and seconded by Councillor John Payne. So, members, I'll go through you again alphabetically. Could you clearly say for, against, or abstain? Starting with Councillor Carol Alloway Martin.
For.
Thanks, Carol. For. Councillor John Caldwell.
For.
Thanks, John. For. Councillor Graham Morgan.
For.
Thanks, Graham. For. Councillor Lorraine Patrick. Thanks, Lorraine. For. Councillor John Payne.
For.
Thanks, John. For. Councillor Brian Robinson.
For.
Thanks, Brian. For. Councillor Robert Vine.
For.
Thanks, Robert. For. Councillor Simon Wheeler.
For.
Thanks, Simon. For. And Councillor Phil Orford.
For.
Thanks, Phil. For. So that recommendation is supported unanimously.
Thank you, members. Moving swiftly along, we come to our agenda item number 8, which is public questions. I'm looking to Joanne. Okay. And member questions?
There are none.
No.
Okay. Then that concludes the meeting. Thank you, members of the public as well. For
Chair, just before you conclude, can we have a report at some stage on the Black Bridge? They've been contacted by a Forestine District Council after the deadlines for the questions from members as to what the status of the Black Bridge situation is. So can I ask, as I said, I've been contacted by a Forestine District Councillor, and I said I would raise it if I could, with your permission, just if we could have a report at some stage in the future as to what the situation is with that bridge.
Okay.
Thanks. You.
Yeah, I'm sure Andrew and Jackie have both picked up on that.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Chair, is that, so just saying to Graham, is that, would it be helpful to get a briefing sooner rather than later, or do you want it actually raised at the committee?
Well, I never had opportunity because the guy who contacted me, the councillor, within last day. So, I mean, I said, well, I'll do what I can, but he didn't give me the chance to raise it, officially and properly. But I think what he's asking for is a status of what's happening, because he's obviously a district councillor in the Lidbrook area. So I said, well, I'll ask. All I can do is ask. We can have an update at some stage.
Yeah, are you?
I think rather than wait for the next committee, I think that's the best way of dealing with it. It seems like there's an urgency. So perfectly happy, Graham, if officers come back with a briefing for you.
Yeah, if the officers
obviously they'll share with the committee.
Yeah, thank you.
To Graham and the rest of the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence. Thanks to the officers for the presentations, and thank you to those who watched online. We will see you next time.